Welcome to Something Different, a place where every video is made to capture your attention and leave an impression. If you enjoy content that feels unique and engaging, subscribe and stay with us. He didn't even look up from his phone when he said it. That's what I remember most. Not the words themselves, but the complete and total indifference behind them, like he was reading a grocery list, not dismantling 12 years of marriage. I want a divorce, Sophie. I've already called a lawyer. I stood in the kitchen doorway, still wearing my coat, laptop bag on my shoulder, takeout containers in both hands because I'd worked through dinner again and thought, for once, I'd bring something home for us. The plastic bags were cutting into my fingers. I remember that too. The thin white handles pressing white lines into my palms. Okay, I said. He looked up then. That surprised him that I didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't drop the food. He'd expected a scene. I could see the faint disappointment cross his face before the arrogance settled back in. I think we both know this hasn't been working, he said, already returning to his phone. And frankly, I can't keep carrying someone who doesn't contribute. It's exhausting. I set the takeout on the counter. I took off my coat. I hung it on the hook by the door like I always did, smoothed the collar like my mother taught me, and I walked upstairs to check on our son. My son was asleep. 9 years old, one arm flung over the edge of the bed, his dinosaur nightlight casting small green shadows across the ceiling. I sat on the edge of his mattress for a long moment and listened to him breathe. Then I went to my office, closed the door, and I smiled for the first time in months. Because my husband had just made the single most expensive mistake of his life. And he had absolutely no idea. Let me go back to the beginning, because this story doesn't make sense without it. I met my husband 12 years ago at a mutual friend's housewarming. He was funny then. Charming in that big room way where everyone leans toward you when you talk. He sold commercial real estate and was good at it, and there was something magnetic about a man who knew exactly what he wanted and went after it without apology. I was 26 and finishing my master's in architecture. I thought his confidence was strength. I was wrong, but it took me years to understand the difference between confidence and contempt. We got married after 2 years together. The first few years were good, or good enough. I started my own practice small, just me and a part-time assistant, operating out of the second bedroom of our first house. My husband thought it was a hobby. He said it warmly then, the way you'd call something cute. Sophie and her little design projects. He'd say it at dinner parties and people would laugh and I would smile and let it go because we were happy, or I thought we were. Our son was born 4 years in. I took 8 weeks and went back to work from home while he slept, drafting plans during nap times. Taking client calls in the backyard so I wouldn't wake him. My husband went back to work the week after the birth. He said someone had to keep the lights on. I didn't argue. I was too tired to argue and too focused on the life I was quietly building to bother. Here is what my husband knew about my work. I took calls sometimes. I had a desk covered in drawings. I occasionally traveled for site visits. He'd stopped asking about the details years ago because the details bored him. Here is what my husband did not know. My little design projects had grown into something he could not have imagined. I specialized in high-end residential architecture, private homes for clients who had significant wealth and very specific taste, and absolutely no interest in being bothered with the ordinary world. My clients were private by nature. Our contracts included non-disclosure clauses as standard. I didn't advertise. Every new client came through a referral from an existing one, and the fees reflected the exclusivity. By the time my husband decided I was a burden he was done carrying, I had 12 active clients and a waitlist. I had not told him. Not because I was planning some elaborate revenge. I hadn't been. For the first several years, I kept my finances separate simply because it was practical sole proprietor, business accounts, liability. And then somewhere along the way, I noticed he'd stopped asking. And then I noticed why. He'd stopped asking because he'd stopped caring about me entirely. I saw it happen slowly. The way you watch a season change. One day the leaves are green. Then you notice one yellow edge on one tree, and you think, well, it's just that tree. And then one morning you look up and everything has turned, and you can't remember exactly when it happened, but you know you were there for all of it and somehow didn't see. The name I kept hearing was Renata. She was a project manager at a development firm my husband had started partnering with, about 3 years before the night in the kitchen. Young, polished in the specific way of someone who has studied how to appear effortless. I met her once at a work event my husband brought me to, and I remember thinking she looked at him the way I had at 26, like he was the most compelling person in the room. I noticed things after that. The way his phone was always face down at home. The work dinners that ran later than they used to. The subtle shift in how he dressed, more care, more attention, more cologne. I noticed, and I waited, and I hoped I was wrong. I was not wrong. I found out for certain about 8 months into whatever it was between them. I wasn't snooping. I'd borrowed his laptop to print a document because my printer was jammed and there was a message open on the screen. Not a text, an email, which told me how careful he thought he was being. Nobody checks email anymore. I read enough. I closed the laptop. I printed my document. I went back to my office and I sat very still for a very long time. And then I made a decision that every single person who hears this story is going to question, and I want to explain it, because I was not stupid, and I was not a doormat, and I was not in denial. I decided to wait. Strategically. Deliberately. With complete awareness. Here is why. I was 3 months away from finalizing the largest contract of my career, a full residential compound for a client in Montana, custom designed from the ground up, 8 figures in property value and a design fee to match. My portion, after expenses, was going to land just over $800,000. I had been working toward that contract for almost 2 years. It was not guaranteed yet. It required my full attention, my full credibility, my absolute professional stability. A messy divorce in the middle of negotiations would have been a disaster. Opposing counsel would have subpoenaed my financials. My client valued discretion above everything. One hint of public chaos in my personal life and he would have walked. I knew him. I had worked for 3 of his friends. He would have walked politely and without explanation, and that would have been that. Beyond the contract, I needed time. Time to meet quietly with my own attorney. Time to move assets correctly, legally, in ways that protected what I'd built from being claimed as marital property it had no right to be claimed as. I had been operating as a sole proprietor for a decade. The business was mine. But these things required documentation, proper timing, professional guidance. I was not going to rush into a courtroom unprepared because I was angry. So I stayed. I kept our house running. I cooked dinner on the nights I wasn't traveling. I attended our son's school events. I was civil and calm and completely unreadable, and I used every spare moment to build my case like the careful, precise professional I had always been. My husband, in the meantime, became less careful. Renata started appearing at events where spouses were expected. He introduced her as a business associate the first time, a colleague the second, and by the third time he stopped introducing her at all and just let the fact of her presence speak for itself. Our son noticed before most of the adults did. He asked me once why Dad's friend came to his soccer game. I told him that sometimes grown-ups have complicated friendships. He looked at me with those serious brown eyes and said, "She looks at Dad weird." 9 years old. I said, "I know, buddy. I finished the Montana contract 14 months ago. Signed, sealed, payment scheduled in 3 installments. The final installment cleared my account 6 weeks before my husband stood in our kitchen and told me he wanted a divorce. 6 weeks. I had spent those 6 weeks doing 2 things. Finishing a quiet conversation with my attorney about next steps, and waiting. I thought he might sense the shift. I thought he might come to me. Part of me, the part that had loved him once and still loved what I thought he could have been, hoped he might look up from whatever he'd decided we were and see what was actually standing in front of him. He didn't. He called his lawyer and then he told me over takeout containers. Fine. The divorce proceedings began in early spring. My husband had hired a sharp attorney who came in with a very confident strategy. The strategy was this. My husband was the primary earner. I was a work-from-home hobbyist whose income was negligible and whose lifestyle was entirely dependent on his salary. He would retain the house, accept minimal support obligations, and we would split custody of our son. His lawyer submitted an income estimate for me of $42,000 per year. I let that number sit in the record for 1 full week before my attorney filed our response. I remember the morning of the first major hearing very clearly. I wore a gray blazer I'd had for years, good fabric, clean lines, nothing that said, "Look at me." My attorney had advised me to be neutral. Warm but neutral. Let the documents do the talking. My husband and his attorney were already seated when we arrived. He glanced at me the way he always had in recent years, the brief, dismissive flick of the eyes that said, "You're not worth the full second." His attorney was reviewing notes and looking professionally unconcerned. My attorney set a folder on the table. A thick one. The mediator called the session to order. Standard procedure, both parties presenting financial disclosures. His attorney went first. My husband's salary, his commissions, his real estate holdings, his retirement accounts. All legitimate, all accounted for. He earned good money. He always had. Then my attorney slid our disclosure across the table. I watched my husband's lawyer pick it up. I watched her read the first page. I watched her turn to the second page. I watched the particular stillness that comes over a person when they are recalculating everything they thought they knew about a situation. She leaned over and said something quietly to my husband. He took the folder. He read the first page. Then he looked up at me, really looked, the way he hadn't in years, and I saw it happen behind his eyes. The same recalculation, the same stillness. The average income I had declared over the previous 3 years was approximately $620,000 annually. The Montana contract alone was listed as a single event receipt of $814,000. My total declared business assets, accounts, and outstanding receivables came to just over $2 million. He put the folder down. He put it down very carefully, like it might break something. Where did he start it? Mr. Harmon, the mediator said patiently, please direct questions to your counsel. His lawyer had already recovered her professional composure, but I caught the moment just before she did. The tight press of her lips. The small exhale. She had built an entire strategy on a fiction, and the fiction had just been replaced with a document 50 pages long. The session recessed for 40 minutes. When we came back, the entire tone of his legal team had changed. Gone was the confident posture, the unhurried body language of people who believe they hold all the cards. His attorney spoke more carefully. More carefully than carefully. She spoke like someone diffusing something. My husband sat beside her and said almost nothing for the rest of the afternoon. He did say one thing, during a brief break when our attorneys had stepped out and we were briefly alone in the room for the first time since this had started. He looked at the table when he said it, not at me. You let me think. He stopped. Started again. You never said anything. You never asked, I said. You decided what I was a long time ago. I just let you keep believing it. He was quiet for a moment. Then, this whole time? This whole time. He shook his head slowly, and in his face I saw something I hadn't expected. Not just the shock, not just the anger at himself, but something almost like grief. Like a man standing in the ruins of a house he'd burned down himself, only now understanding what had been inside it. I didn't feel sorry for him. But I didn't feel the triumph I thought I would, either. What I felt was something quieter. Something that felt like finally being able to put something very heavy down. The financial settlement discussions took 6 more weeks. His attorney had clearly done some fast and thorough research into my client relationships, my project history, the scope and nature of my business. Everything was legitimate. Everything was documented. My business income had been earned entirely through my independent sole proprietorship. Established years before certain financial periods in question. Operating through separate business accounts that had never commingled with household funds beyond a modest monthly transfer I made for household expenses, which, my attorney noted with perfect timing, I had been making consistently for 8 years. Meaning I had in fact been contributing to household expenses this entire time. My husband had simply assumed those transfers were coming from a savings account. They were coming from my operating account. His alimony claim was withdrawn. His petition for the house was withdrawn. The custody arrangement he proposed, minimal visitation, designed to inconvenience rather than parent, was renegotiated to something I was willing to accept, shared physical custody, with primary residence for our son with me. Renata, I learned through no effort of my own, had already moved into his apartment by the time the proceedings began. He'd apparently made that transition very smoothly. I found this out from a mutual acquaintance, who seemed to expect me to be devastated by the information. I thanked her for telling me, and moved on. On the day the divorce was finalized, my attorney and I shook hands in the parking lot. It was early June. Warm. The kind of afternoon that feels like permission. She said, I have to tell you, I've been doing this for 19 years, and that disclosure folder is in my personal top 5. I laughed, actually laughed, and it felt strange and real and good. I drove to my son's school and picked him up myself, which I didn't always get to do, and he was surprised to see me at the gate and ran over with his backpack bouncing and a drawing he'd made in art class of what appeared to be a very large green dog. "That's not a dog," he informed me seriously. "That's a dragon." "Obviously," I said. "I can see that now." He asked if we could get ice cream. I said yes. We drove with the windows down, and he told me about his day in the way children do, looping, non-chronological. 3 stories happening at once, and I listened to every word. That evening, after he was in bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and my laptop, and I looked at the notes for a new project that had come in that morning. A referral from the Montana client, a young couple in Colorado who had just purchased land and wanted someone to design a home that would grow with their family for decades. The wife had sent a long, thoughtful email about what the house should feel like: warm in winter, full of light in summer, the kind of place where children would want to come home. I wrote back that evening. I told her I would love to talk. My son padded downstairs around 9, which he does sometimes when he can't sleep. He climbed onto the couch next to me with his blanket and his dragon drawing, which he'd apparently retrieved from his backpack for reasons only a 9-year-old fully understands. "Mom," he said, "can you teach me how to design stuff someday? Like houses?" I looked at him. The small, serious face. The green dragon clutched against his chest. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "I can absolutely teach you that." He was asleep in 12 minutes. I pulled the blanket up around him and I sat in the quiet of the house, my house. Just mine, and his now, and I thought about the woman who'd stood in the kitchen doorway 8 months ago holding takeout and listening to a man explain her limitations to her. I thought about how certain he had been. How completely, thoroughly, dismissively certain. He'd calculated everything based on what he believed about me. He'd been wrong about every single number. I closed the laptop. I turned off the lamp. I listened to my son breathe in the dark, the same way I had the night this started, and I felt something settle in my chest like a door clicking quietly shut. Not triumph. Not anger. Just peace. Just the very clean, very quiet feeling of a woman who spent years being underestimated and simply let it happen, and kept working, and waited, and turned out to be exactly who she always knew she was. He called me once, 2 weeks after the finalization. I let it go to voicemail. He said something about our son's schedule, and something else at the end that I almost didn't catch, low, almost mumbled, like he wasn't sure he was going to say it at all. "I didn't know," he said. "I really didn't know." I listened to it once. Deleted it. I already knew he didn't know. That was never the point. The point was that I did.
Don't pity me. My heart doesn't need your mercy. I can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, fell deeper than I thought I would. But pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection. Now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are don't have to save me, darling. I'll learn to breathe again. So keep your sympathy behind you. I'm freezing. I'm bleeding, slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading,